Spiegelman-Coleman to introduce the next candidate, or the first candidate.
Yes.
Shelley.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shelley Spiegel-Coleman. I'm the Executive Director of Californians Together. We're a coalition of 23 statewide parent, professional, and civil rights organizations whose focus is on improving policy and practice for English learners. We have been a longtime partner of the Water Cooler Network, and we've had several discussions about what California needs to do to support and meet the needs of California's English language learners and dual language learners. With the passage of Prop 58, November 2016, 73.5% of the electorate voted yes to encouraging all students to learn multiple languages in our schools. And for us, what's so significant about that number is that it was passed in every single county in this state. An applause, absolutely. Our next governor will be critical in being able to implement the proposition, to implement high-quality multilingual programs, and to be able to address the bilingual teacher shortage. During these gubernatorial conversations, we look forward to hearing from the candidates as to what is their vision about educating California's English learners and dual language learners. And we'll start the conversation now with gubernatorial candidate John Chiang. John Chiang currently serves as our California State Treasurer, our banker, and he oversees trillions of dollars of transactions daily. Previous to this, he served as California State Controller from 2007 to 2015. In both roles, he has prioritized fiscal accountability and transparency. If elected governor, he hopes to create the same opportunities for families that his parents, immigrants from Taiwan, were able to give to their children, and those opportunities for all of our children to have the opportunity to succeed and to be able to meet their dreams. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our candidate, John Chiang.
Good to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that Shelley? Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Shelley, for the kind words of introduction. I just want to take a moment to pause and think of the victims in Las Vegas. Obviously, it's something incredibly heartbreaking and wrenching to all of us. In my first week in public office at the Board of Equalization, my sister was murdered. Every time somebody gets murdered, it's just so incredibly painful for me. So my heart goes out to the families and the victims and the friends, and we are with them. I want to thank you for this incredible opportunity to be with all of you. I want to thank Shelley. Observation about English language. I am here on this stage because of the dream. I am the oldest child of two English learners. Many of you have heard my family story. My dad came to this country in the early 1950s, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, less than $100 in his pocket to learn his 5th language, English, and later to get his PhD in chemical engineering. My mom went to a junior college to learn English, and they had dreams to give their kids the best opportunities on this globe. And they knew, and they instilled in all their kids, that it was only going to happen if we got access to a world-class education. I have the good fortune of having witnessed my mom, because I was 1 year older than my next brother, but 8 years older than my sister and 10 years older than my baby brother. And I used to watch my mom at age 2 make homemade flashcards and start drilling my little sister and then my little brother with the alphabet and then with math. Little did I learn until I started prepping and learning more about early childhood education that my mom waited too long to start that type of education, right? Because we know the cognitive development, we know the linguistic functions, right? Oftentimes are very powerful when you're 7.5 months old. And so I am all in regards to education, right? You can hear me on the campaign stump. I said, if we have to do anything, right, and if we're going to transform California, you have to fundamentally make the investment in education. And it has to start not only with early childhood education, as traditionally seen, right? We have Norman Yee in San Francisco who's pushing on efforts from 0 to 3, right? We know it's more costly, but when you understand how early you start to engage in brain development, it is going to be absolutely critical. Now, I bring a very different sense than the other candidates. I'm the only person who have served in all 3 financial offices in the state of California. So Eric and the others here, when California was in fiscal crisis, when somebody had to challenge Governor Schwarzenegger during that last crisis, when he signed a budget that was $15 billion off, I was the person who stood up and said it was wrong. Why? Because who pays the price? You can listen to a campaign commercial, ad lib. I was talking to some residents in San Francisco because I said the children pay the price when the adults get the budget wrong. And then we know in the education community we had $10 billion worth of deferrals. We had a $30 billion cash deficit. So I'm the only person who brings the tax expertise to the next position. I was the state controller to keep California from fiscal default on our bonds, right? And if you look at the ratings agencies, they said 5 times, we like the way the controller, then me, handles money. And then today, as the treasurer, I'm going to make sure that we invest in the educational programs to get maximize and optimize the returns so that we can go all in on early childhood education and frankly all of education. We have too many kids today that are going into the workforce working on debt, so my platform of upward economic mobility is not only education, but it's housing, it's job creation, it's the things that everybody wants passionately for a quality of life and the dream that we call California's. Thank you very much.
Sit over here. No, you sit here. I'll sit here.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me introduce myself again. Louis Friedberg, Executive Director of EdSource. And I don't think Shelley mentioned the rules of the discussion, but each candidate has 5 minutes to talk to you, and which you kept your 5 minutes. Thank you. And then you and I are going to talk for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to the floor for about 5 minutes for you to ask some questions. And anyway, pleasure to meet you.
Happy to be here.
And I did want to observe that these used to be 2 events, the Birth to 5 water cooler and the K to 12 water cooler, and great to see them brought together because, as you've indicated, these are all connected. Let me start with the question of universal preschool, which has been an issue that's been a burning issue in California for quite a few years and is kind of on a hold at the moment. I'm wondering where you stand on that issue. To what extent should the state be making universal preschool available to all kids?
Yeah, I fully support universal preschool, and then actually for early childhood educators, we need to make sure that they have advanced degrees. We want people that can provide high quality instruction, and we have to provide support, whether it's in the classroom or within community settings, to make sure that people know how to facilitate what is the best practices possible, right? People will talk about play, people will talk about other types of things. We know that you need high quality interaction between individuals, right? Because then everybody else, if it's just listening to plain words, you can just stick a kid in front of a television. And we know that the outcomes aren't great when you just stick a child in front of a television. So what can we do in regards to making sure that all the community participants understand what really creates transformative change in a child's life? And then we have to understand that we live in different types of economic circumstances. Bob Ross had convened a men and boys of color kitchen cabinet, of which I was a member. Antonio was also a member. Right, we have to make sure that how do we invest in particular communities? A lot of my work focuses on economic upward mobility of individuals. As the Board of Equalization member, I was the first state elected official, I believe, to provide free income taxes for middle and low income residents. We know that people struggle to pay for housing. They struggle to pay for their electricity bill. They struggle to put clothes on their kids' back. Right, today I'm one of the state's leaders on building more affordable housing. Right, some of the issues that Holly and the other previous panel mentioned, right? So I am trying to figure out what we do to invest in communities, because you can't always just refer to that old Harvard study of taking a child from a lower income community and sticking them in Palo Alto or Beverly Hills to change their outcomes. We need to invest in every single community in the state of California to make sure that people know how to get the skill sets, that have the talents, that have the abilities to change every single child's life so that they can reach their fullest potential.
But let me ask you, you're the money guy.
I am.
The current governor has said that California can't afford to pay for universal preschool. And it's just one of these sacrifices that we have to make. So can California afford universal preschool, and where would the funds come from?
I think it's crystal clear. We can't afford not to have universal preschool in the state of California. But we have a globally competitive economy. It's becoming incredibly dynamic. So it's not only early childhood education, we have to figure out throughout the spectrum how we provide education, right? Today we have 50, 60-year-olds who are being displaced by technology. We need to make sure that they get a skill set that, right, they have an opportunity for gainful employment so that they can have dignity in their life, that they don't have to face the extraordinary struggle that so many people face. We have to make some tough choices, right? But unlike some of the others, right, I created additional options for the state. So when I was the controller, I sued President Bush's administration, MMS, to retain our mineral rights. When I was the controller, I was the most successful auditor in California history. I did $9.5 billion of audit findings. Kathleen Connell was my predecessor's predecessor. She did $2.5 billion of audit findings, right? How do we spend our money more efficiently and effectively? And when you think that we dispense $50% of our general fund budget to education, that will help. As the state treasurer, I've worked very aggressively to refinance when we have better economic conditions, provide better financial management, enhance California's credit status. So over the first 2 3/4 years as the state treasurer, over the lifetime of those bonds, we will have saved the taxpayers of California's $5.9 billion, right? So 100 million here, 500 million here, right? We can add up and find the funding for early childhood education.
Let me ask you, because one of the debates here, or sticking points in terms of the preschool, is should we expand transitional kindergarten, which now really serves, just by quirk of how this program was set up, the oldest 4-year-olds. I don't think you're old for 4-year-olds, but or should the state be expanding preschool? And actually, there's been a push for full-day preschool. So where do you stand? Should we be expanding TK, or should the emphasis be on preschool?
Well, I want good education that's basically all day long, right? We can't have this system today where you have kids going in for half a day, right? That creates lack of access, especially for low-income folks, right? Low-income folks who have to take public transportation, who can't leave in the middle of the day, right? They're not going to provide access to their kids. What I wanted to do is I wanted to tie in services. So not only education, but we ought to, especially for low-income folks, housing services, healthcare services, social services, tied in with the county and private sector. So I am open to what that looks like. I just want to make sure that we have all-day education for the kids.
So full day, you think that should be?
I like full day.
Yeah, okay. Let's move to K-12. One of the concerns, I think, that a lot of people in this room, I'm sure, wonder where will the next governor come down on many of these reforms that are now in play, that Patrick and Eric and the senator talked about, that seem to be pointing us in the right direction.
I wish I was here.
But local control funding formula, for example. Do you think that we are on the right track in terms of these reforms? And to what extent do you think we should stay the course, and if you were governor, that there would be continuity, or where do you see we need to move in other directions?
So I support LCFF. One of the things I want to do is I want to see what happens in the classroom, right? We have to make sure that the teachers are well supported, they're well led, they're well trained, so that they can make sure that we get student academic achievement at the highest levels, right? Part of this is why I like about LCFF and the 8 factors, but more importantly, how it's applied, is what do we do to make sure that we build good school site leadership? And then what I don't want to happen is I don't want to see this, the haves and the have-nots, right? The misallocation of resources, especially those that don't have the same accountability and transparency. You have to have the same conflict of interest, accountability, transparency standards so that schools can be responsive. We don't want kids with special needs not having that particular access. And unfortunately, that's what's happening with the current system.
So you would support the basic framework where we have concentration grants going to these high-need students and the supplemental grants?
You're talking about the additional 20 and the additional
yes,
50
exactly.
based on, yeah.
Yeah, is that,
Yes.
you think that's,
Yeah, when you have English as a second language, when you have foster care kids and you have a large percentage of kids who qualify for free or for reduced lunch, right, where there is that great need, I want to make sure that we have the appropriate investment. But I don't want that to be the cap, right? The state has to do a much more effective job. We are so underinvested. So mine is, because I am in the financial office as I was the auditor, I want to put more money and let's make sure that we measure the results so we can get a high attainment.
I have to ask you this thank you. I have to ask you this question because this comes up and I'm sure it'll come up in this forum, that California lags so far behind most other states in terms of how much we spend per capita on kids. And we had Prop 30, we've generated additional taxes, and the California is moving up a little bit, but we're still not where the state should be.
Yeah. Between 42nd
Again,
and
this is
46th.
what you do. You're in charge of California's funding. What do you see as the potential to really increase funding for kids and for schools?
Yeah, there's a whole host of different things that we can do and make sure. Part of that, as I said, making sure that we prioritize education is always at the front of the line. That's why I took the tough action as the Controller's Office to make sure that money was available for education, even though others paid the price. But part of this is, what do we do better with how we use our money, the particular revenue streams? How do we improve the efficiencies? And frankly, how do we go back? You know, I was on the commercials for Proposition 30, right? They wanted somebody to validate that we had this in place, right? When the media asked Betty Yee, right, how do we determine whether those monies were actually used for education? I created the Track Prop 30 website, right, because I wanted to validate for the voters that we, in fact, were using the additional tax revenues to pay for education. So, right, you can go on Betty's website, Track Prop 30, and check how those dollars are used, right? When you establish trust, right, when we can deliver results, right, it makes it easier when we go out to the voters to say, we need money for education.
Could you see going back to the voters to ask for more?
Yeah, there's a lot of things we can do in regards to parcel tax and other things to make sure that we have additional monies for the state, right? There's other iterations of what we may do in the future from cap and trade or carbon taxes or other things, that could bring more money for the state.
Another tension point has been local control versus how much should the states be telling schools and school districts what to do. Where do you come down on that? Do you think the state needs to be more prescriptive than it is now, or do you think we have the balance right at
Well,
this point?
the state has to establish the standards we want, but I'd like to give the local school districts and their leadership the flexibility to understand what's happening in communities. Our communities are incredibly different, right? You have the English learners, right? You have issues in regards to poverty. So I want to be able to create flexibility and individual partnerships. But I want I want them to understand the governor's office is going to be really aggressive in regards to being a positive partner, to reach out to the business sector and to reach out to philanthropic organizations to establish, to go after social impact grants and bonds so that we can get additional funding, partnerships, and best evidence practices into local districts so that they can thrive and succeed.
But just to press you a little bit, in terms of, there have been concerns that we're not perhaps seeing the results that people would like, or not as fast enough, and so that the state needs to be really trying to hold the school districts more accountable than they are currently under this multiple measure accountability system.
Yeah, we're not going to have failing schools. I'm not going to accept failing schools as the governor, right? Every year you delay and lag, right? it's more than the school. More importantly, it's about the child, right? How does that child measure? So what do we do? I was a very good student, but there's subjects I struggled with, right? So I was fortunate to have great individual teachers, right? When I hit a particular concept that I had struggled with, like in geometry, my teacher would intervene, right? So I want to understand where children are struggling, right? And I want to engage as you see that the school's not performing as well, and I want to have those conversations with the school site leadership, the elected officials, the school board members, the administrators, the PTA, right? To say, it's like, what do we need to do to like change direction here or improve and accelerate progress?
I want to ask you about charter schools. About 10% of kids are this year, for the first time, 600,000 students out of about 6 million are in charter schools. California, by and large, has been receptive to charter schools. But in some districts, I think Los Angeles is one good example, and some other districts where there's real concerns that if you have too many students in charter schools, that is siphoning off funds that make it hard for the districts to function. You don't have the economies of scale and so on. Where do you come down on charter schools? Do you think there should be some limits, or do you think there should be unlimited expansion, which really has been where California has been?
Yeah, so you can't have unlimited expansion, right? You're going to unwind the whole financing mechanism for the state of California. You're going to have all these incredible obligations that could potentially put the state in harm's way, right? We support the charter schools, right, because they were created for innovation, right? So you have people that are some incredibly high-performing charter schools that you want to support. They're engaged in certain types of activities that are productive, right? But I don't want separate standards, right? They have to be subject to conflict of interest standards, right? You don't. I'm opposed to charter schools for profit, right? Because I don't believe you ought to be using public dollars so that you can line somebody's pocketbook. They have to be held accountable, and then they have to be transparent. So the part of this is working through. They've had some issues when they started. I understand some of the objections, right? But to use public dollars, you have to have public trust, and I believe to have public trust, you have to be straightforward, you have to be forthcoming, and so people have to understand what you're actually doing, and they have to be more inclusive, right? I'm not saying they're all exclusive, right? But that one particular instance, I have a friend whose husband is for charter schools. She's personally vehemently opposed to charter schools. She has a child with special needs, and as she was approaching the various charter schools, they were dissuading her from enrolling her child, not in a negative sense, but they say, we don't have programs to assist your daughter, right? That's not acceptable, right? They ought to be able to provide assistance, great programming for every single child.
Great. I think we now have a time to go to get a couple of questions from the floor. Okay, start with you.
Second row right here.
Right here. Yeah. Quick question.
Yeah, my name's Irvin Morton. I'm the vice president for education for the PTA for 4 counties with a very diverse. Okay, I'm the VP for education for PTA for 4 very diverse counties, Santa Clara down through Monterey. The one question I want to ask you is about Prop 98, which was voted in to provide a floor for education funding. And like most floors, it quickly became a ceiling. How do we fix that without my going into much more detail? But it is a ceiling because of its own internal design. The legislators are afraid to raise funding beyond that minimum because it gets locked in, and
right.
They have even less flexibility then.
Yeah, I fully support Prop 98, right? But it has created that issue, as you pointed out, where it has become the ceiling. We're just going to have to identify priorities, and education's, for me, as I stated at the outset, the priority. And so, frankly, during times, we know that you can postpone Prop 98 during difficult economic times, but we have to come up with some type of trajectory as to what type of financing and what type of financing stream and the level needed to address how we're going to finance world-class education for all the kids in this state, right? So that will be part of the complex conversation that we will have, not just for K through 12, but frankly for the CSU system and the UC system.
Great. Time for one more question.
So,
Okay.
hi, you had talked.
Could you just...
Debbie
that-
Silverman, First 5 California. So you had talked about the early childhood workforce and how important it is to better educate and prepare them to work with the young children. What are your thoughts on improving compensation for that early childhood workforce?
Yeah, so it's not early childhood education, but it's across the board, right?
It's really early childhood. They
Well,
barely
we know early childhood education is especially underpaid, right? And frankly, if you're going to upgrade what is required, but we know throughout the educational system, right, educators are particularly underpaid. But part of this is, as you look at the research, especially in regards to early childhood education, the advanced knowledge that's required. Other jurisdictions are looking at requiring instructors to have a master's degree, and so we ought to pay people the appropriate salary so that they can get the appropriate education, so that they can have a decent standard of living, that they can live in the state of California. So it's not only the salary, right? But one of the things that I've been pushing for is financing more workforce housing, right? How do you have teachers able to live in the communities that they reside in, right? Because then they become various actors. What do we do in regards to the support of the teachers, right? Because oftentimes when I talk to teachers, and I've talked to Teacher of the Year from various states, what's created their incentive, what types of models, right? So what type of educational support can they get? So yes, let's look at the basket of what creates a great incentive for early childhood educators and others.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to just get in one quick question, and then we can wrap it up. But,
Yeah,
the Smarter Balance test scores came out this past week, and they were flat. And there's some concerns that they hadn't gone up, but other interpretations is this is hard work, and California, we shouldn't just be looking at test scores. We now have a multiple measure system in place. How did you react to those test scores, and do you agree with the notion that we shouldn't be so focused on test scores, which really is kind of a national obsession, I would say?
Well, the test scores is a measure, right? We know that oftentimes the test scores don't fully reflect everything that's being not picked up by the child. At the end of the day, it's the knowledge, right? But also we have to measure the circumstances that we're creating. So what do we learn from that test score? What other additional knowledge can we get, right? Are they in communities of poverty? Are they in communities where there's economic distress? Are they one of the 3 schools in Fresno school district where over the 50% of the kids come from homeless conditions, right? So let's tie all of that. And for me, I'm never satisfied, right? We have to make sure that we're always on an upward trajectory, right? And so whether it's a real plateau or it's incorrect, right? Let's learn from what's that provided and make sure that we do more and we get everybody involved. What I like about this room is that you have people from different backgrounds working on different issues. It's cross-jurisdictional, it's diverse, right? And so this is that critical step as to how we get the most valuable input to create further input so that we can have better achievement in students' lives.
Thank you so much. John Chiang, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I now want to call on Dr. Ross Thompson to introduce the next candidate.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Ross Thompson. I'm a faculty member in psychology at the University of California at Davis. I'm a developmental scientist. I study the kids we're talking about most of my time. I'm also president of the board of directors of a national nonprofit called 0 to 3, which, as the term implies, is a nonprofit devoted to the healthy development of babies, toddlers, and their families, especially those at risk. And at UC Davis, I'm also on the executive committee of the Center for Poverty Research. So there are many things that bring me here and maintain my fidelity to you all. We're focusing on early learning and as an agenda-setting conversation for the California governor's race because of decades of research on young children that has shown things that we all know to be true, how explosively the brain is developing in the early years of life, and how much the healthy development of the brain depends on early experiences that are stimulating and secure and developmentally appropriate. And in California, more than many other places, this new understanding has led us to new policies to support early learning, from an emphasis on the quality of early care and education programs, recognizing that every environment in which a young child is in is a learning environment, to transitional kindergarten and other efforts to ensure that children are ready to benefit when they reach school. These achievements are noteworthy, and they're ones we take great pride in, and they constitute early learning 1.0 for California and the nation. But those of us who study young children's development have moved on to early learning 2.0 because of new discoveries about early development that are both exciting and disquieting. They include the realization that even babies and toddlers are complex conceptual learners, far less egocentric than we had earlier believed, and that they're establishing the foundations for understanding language and math before they can say their first word or their first number. These discoveries include the realization that even as we have created high-quality preschool programs in the state, many California 3-year-olds are arriving at these programs already far behind their peers in vocabulary and other skills. And they include the recognition that experiences of chronic stress are impairing the learning and the emotional well-being of many of our youngest children, including those who are only 1 or 2 years old, underscoring that from the beginning of life, social emotional health and well-being is directly connected to the functioning of the mind. So early learning 2.0 is focusing our attention in a new way on the first 3 years of life and the experiences during those years that enable young children to become active, engaged learners when they reach preschool, such as longer paid family leave that provides a foundation for the development of secure attachments and strong bonding, such as home visitation that helps new parents in the skills of caring for a young child and understanding how that child's mental abilities are growing, such as new attention to those who are caring for babies and toddlers outside the home, who have typically had the least preparation and the least support to do this most important task for our state. And all of this combined with special attention to young children coming from conditions of stress and difficulty, because if we do not do so, they'll be carrying its effects with them for years to come. Delaine Eastin gets this. This is something I learned a couple of years ago when I shared the stage with her in testimony to a combined assembly budget subcommittees several years ago. Delaine was introduced at the hearing as a well-known advocate for children and was invited to say a few words. And for the next few minutes, I watched in horror as she proceeded off the cuff to say almost everything I was about to say as a distinguished research expert. I went back to my notes for my testimony and saw parts X'd out and notes coming in, and I've never had to revise my testimony so quickly. As you know, she was elected in 1994 to the first of 2 terms as State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the only woman who has ever been elected to this important position. And during her term of office, she worked to reduce class size and raise academic standards in California schools. She also championed universal preschool, helped to usher in the provisions of Proposition 10 that led to the creation of First 5 California. She served 4 terms in the California Assembly prior to this, where educational concerns were her focus, and since that time has brought her uniquely valuable perspective to numerous boards and commissions, as well as teaching at Mills College. Please join me in welcoming Delaine Eastin.
Well, good afternoon. It is wonderful to be here in a room of fellow travelers. This is not my first water cooler, after all, and not my first rodeo. I want to just say to everyone here, thank you for being here today and for your understanding of what we must do in this state, of the fact that we are letting our children down in important ways. I want to just remind everybody that the state constitution says from all revenues there shall first be set aside the monies for the education of children through institutions of higher education. And yet that has not been happening, really. We have dropped to 41st in per pupil spending in K-12, and look at preschool and child development. We took the steepest cuts during the big recession in 07-08. Even though child development was only 3% of the state budget, it took 20% of the hits, and that money has still not been restored. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that it's time we really do follow the research. We don't need any more task forces to study. We've got all this research. We have the finest public research institutions in the world in California. We know we need to take care of prenatal care. We know we need to absolutely give children support and child care from 0 to 3. And then we really ought to have universal preschool for all, frankly. And we know this is a certainty because we have these great research institutions. When I went to France to visit the French preschools with Karen Hill Scott, the woman in France said, I said, well, do you have research you can share with us on how your more than 50-year experiment has given us help? And she said, well, we do not have as many good research institutions as you do. We use your research. The people in this room know that in The Scientist in the Crib, it says the human baby's brain is really a network wired together by language and love instead of by optic fiber. We need to have safe, secure, wonderful facilities. And we ought to look at France. Look, in France, the preschool teachers have the same level of education and the same pay as elementary teachers. It's time for us to do that in California. And for heaven's sakes, it is also time for us to understand that, by the way, kindergarten should be mandatory and full day. But when it comes to preschool, isn't it horrifying to all of you in this room? Many people don't know we're behind states like Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma. As a native Californian, it hurts my heart. And I will just say to all of you, we have to also not only have great teachers who are paid a living wage, by God, we need great facilities so that the children walk into a room where it looks like the grown-ups are serious. All of you know that, in fact, we do make a statement and we lay the groundwork. 90% of the brain's development is by the age of 5. And so if we're laying that groundwork, and I have the greatest respect for Ross, and I thank him for his lovely introduction, but we actually have absolutely the best research in the world that tells us that before 5, we have a lot of heavy lifting to do if each one of those kids is going to have a great opportunity. I'm ashamed to tell you tonight that we're 41st in per pupil spending in K-12, but #1 in per prisoner expenditures in the nation. Budgets are statements of values, and we need to budget for yes, prenatal, yes, child care, and then yes, child development. We have to fight like heck. And I will say to all of you, I was the honorary co-chair of the Prop 10. I went out and fought for Prop 10, and when Arnold Schwarzenegger tried to steal the money, I fought him on that too. I will just, yeah. And so I know what my values are. It's like the values of a family. You take care of your kids first. You worry about the new car later. You worry about the new couch later. You worry about the vacation later. You take care of your children first. My favorite quote is Neil Postman's. Children are living messages we send to a time we will never see. What is our message? I hope it's one of loving, supportive, really conscientiously wonderful care and education before kindergarten, and then mandatory full-day kindergarten and great K-12 and wonderful higher ed that is free again for kids. And that's what I'm going to fight to do as governor of California. Thank you all. Always a pleasure, Louis.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Good to see you.
You want to be there or
You
here?
sit right here in the middle. Delaine,
You want me in the
sit
middle? All right.
Yeah, why not?
This is the hot seat, I
You're the
guess.
candidate. Well, pleasure to be talking with you, Delaine Eastin.
Always a pleasure.
We had a lot of dealings with each other when you were superintendent. And is it the case that you are probably the first former state superintendent of public instruction that's running for governor? Or is anybody know?
As far as I know.
Yeah. Well, at least in the modern era. So you bring extraordinary knowledge of the entire field to this race. So we can actually get down to some actual specifics. And one of the issues that you raise constantly, you've mentioned 41st in the nation in terms of spending, and I think some questions how one measures it, and what exactly the ranking is, but it's either that or it's some other number close to it. How can California bump up that really shameful rating? How do we actually do it?
Budgets really are statements of values, and it's a question of us stepping up and doing the right thing by our kids. I think one of the things, and most political people won't tell you this, but it's time we took a look at Proposition 13 and the commercial industrial property tax. It's, the fact is that houses turn over more rapidly. Chevron, Valero, some of the biggest companies in California haven't turned over since Prop 13 passed. So maybe we should have a higher rate at which commercial and industrial properties are taxed. Maybe instead of the 1% that houses have, they should be 1.5%. And then we should put that money into things like educating our children from preschool to graduate school. But we also ought to change the local rules for passing a parcel tax for buying the staff. The truth is we let you fix the building with a 55% vote, but it's a 66 2/3 vote to staff the building. And if you could send your kid to a beautiful school with a lousy teacher, or have your child taught by Socrates sitting on the rock, you go with Socrates and the rock. And so as a matter of values, we ought to change what we did for the builders, essentially, we ought to do for the children and their education.
You think the voters are ready to take on that so-called third rail?
I do. The fact is, it's when the Proposition 13 said they won in a landslide, Howard Jarvis and Gann both bragged about their landslide. They didn't get 66 2/3 vote. I don't believe you should be allowed to set a level for passing an initiative that you can't reach yourself.
Let me then ask you, because I think the state has been quite creative recently in redistributing the funds that we have to target the funds at the kids who need it the most, at least many of them, because I think we'd agree there's other kids that are not getting the services that they need. But what is your view of the local control funding formula?
I'm very positive about the local control funding formula. I've said for years we should have a weighted student formula. Having said that, if you're at the bottom 10 of the 50 states in per pupil spending, you're essentially redirecting the deck chairs on the Titanic. We used to be 5th of the 50 states in per pupil spending, tied with New York. Today, New York is spending twice as much per child as California. We are underinvested, and so LCFF becomes an excuse. There are people in Sacramento saying, well, we have local control now. It's up to the locals to fix it. Good luck. And I say, LCFF is a step in the right direction, but as long as schools are so underfunded in the most expensive state in the union, with the highest percentage in number of poor children and the highest percentage in number of English learners, we need to reinvest in education such that we can say we're in the top 10, not the bottom 10.
Local control. Many districts are now getting these additional funds. Concerns that maybe the funds aren't going to where they're supposed to go to. Do you think, and you were state superintendent, so you have a real sense of what Sacramento can do and can't do, but should Sacramento be more involved? Or do you think we've got the balance right now?
I don't think there's enough resources in this system right now. So I think the system is so badly underfunded that there's sort of a complacency about saying, well, we've got local control. It's up to the locals now when the locals are so underfunded. We are the most expensive state in the union. And so to be so low and to say, and then we gave you a bunch of money, well, yes, but you also gave us a big bill for pensions. And so reality is that many districts are not able to put more money into whether it's pre-K or preschool and or K-12 because they have to pay the pension money. And so this is really a very difficult position that a lot of school districts are in. And I really believe that that we need a much more realistic understanding of how expensive it is to live in California, how many kids need our extra help, and how we're not giving the extra scaffolding and the money for the extra scaffolding that local districts would like to provide. Largest class size in America, fewest number of nurses, librarians, counselors. Is that nurse important? Well, it was a nurse that called my mother and told her to get my eyes checked. Is the counselor important? It was the counselor that called me in and said, you're not taking the classes you need to go to the university. So these people, the librarian who got me to read all the biographies of all the women in the library and made me think about doing things. So these people are important. And in the end, right now, you see districts. I'm privileged to have a school named after me, and they used to have a preschool on site. But they had to close the preschool because they needed those classrooms because of the growth of the student population. All over California right now, we have people making Hobson's choices when we really should be saying education is the most important thing we do. It says that in the Constitution. Let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's make sure that kids, I'm a machinist daughter. My mom's a dress clerk. I get to go to UC Davis. At the time, it was really a stretch for them, but it was still affordable. $82.50 a semester to go to Davis. That included my health insurance. My best friend went to San Jose State, $42 a semester. And community colleges were free. Some of you saw the headline that said New York became the first state to offer free community colleges. Not so. California was the first state. We did it for 30 years, and we ought to go back to it.
Let me ask you about what goes on in the classroom, because I think often we don't talk about that enough in these discussions. But Common Core, also big reform. I think there's a lot of promise, and I think raised expectations. What's your take on the Common Core, and do you think it's making a difference or will make a difference?
I think it can make a difference, but I will tell you all, look, it's good that we have standards, that we tell people that what our expectations are. That's a good thing. Having said that, right now in California, we have a huge teacher shortage. People ask me, why is that, Delaine? I said, well, the slogan should be that floggings will continue until morale improves. And of course, it's especially bad in preschool and child development. I had a wonderful woman who came to my office to work. She was getting her master's at Sacramento State, and she loved her job. She was a preschool teacher in Bev Boz's school, but she had to quit that because she only got $600 a month, take-home pay. $600 a month. She had 4 kids she wanted to send to college, so she quit. Her name's Camille Mabin. I hired her out of that internship. I'm no fool. And so what you need, though, we don't want these wonderful teachers to leave teaching, whether it's K-12, whether it's higher ed, or whether it's preschool and child development. We want them to be there, and that means we have to do a better job of giving them the preparation they need and giving them the salary they need that they can afford to do this. This is important work. In France, they pay the preschool teachers what they pay an elementary teacher, but they have the same level of education. It's time for us to reach for that star.
We're gonna ask for questions in a minute. Just wanted to get in one question on charter schools. What is your general view on charter schools? Do you think the state has policy is where it should be, or should there be some limits on charter school expansion, particularly in some school districts where you've got large numbers of students going into charters?
I think it's more nuanced than that. And you should know that Al Shanker, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, were one of the first big proponents of charter schools. So we have some excellent charters, but we have some terrible charters. So I've called for a moratorium until we get the rules right. We cannot have people saying, you don't bring your special needs child here, we don't have a special ed teacher. That's illegal, and it shouldn't be allowed. The school districts that are in this room know very well they have to pick their auditor from a list provided by the state of California. The charters don't. That should not be allowed. No for-profit businesses should be running charters with our taxpayer money. And at the end of the day, yes, we want to keep the good ones that are doing the right work, helping dropout recovery and or doing some arts magnet or a STEM magnet. We want to support those. But we have to put out of business the people like the charter school in Livermore where they were charging Chinese children $60,000 a kid and promising they'd go to Berkeley. But see, the superintendent in Livermore was nimble and on her toes. She saw what was going on and she closed them down, and she's prosecuting them. But at the end of the day, we've got to have much better oversight, and then we can have a conversation about which ones should be open and which ones should not be. But too many are breaking the law. And this whole thing about sending the kids home a week before the test, that's illegal and immoral. So we have to look at this system and shore it up a bit, and then we can have a conversation about charters.
Okay, time for a couple of questions for Delaine Eastin. Yes.
Hi, my name is Alejandra with Californians for Justice, and given there are 6.2 million low-income students, foster youth, and English language learners in our public schools, what specific actions or measures will you take to close the achievement gap and ensure that all students, regardless of race or zip code, are successful in their education?
Well, that's a great question, and number one, of course, is universal preschool, because too many of our children on the margins, financially and otherwise, don't get that opportunity. And so let's give every child universal preschool that's high quality. Second, I'm on the board of YOLO CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates. It's one of the few boards I've remained on since I've started doing this crazy work, because I believe that every child should have a great education. I know a wonderful young woman who has gotten her PhD at University of California, Santa Barbara. I went to her robe ceremony, and her high school counselor was there, and a couple of her high school teachers were there, and I was there, and her beau and his family were there. There was nobody there from her family. And so, but she made it because she had some good foster people and a great counselor and some good teachers. It makes a difference that there are caring people in preschools, in K-12, in colleges and universities, and we can, in fact, help those kids. But we have a responsibility to make sure we're bringing back the counselors, we're dead last in counselors, bringing back the psychologists, we're dead last in psychologists, and creating better scaffolding for the kids that may be on the margins. I know more about ACEs than most candidates for anything, you know, adverse childhood experiences. And I'm fond of saying, if you're not from a dysfunctional household, you probably married somebody from a dysfunctional household. Or your best friend is from a dysfunctional household. I'm a triple dipper. And what we now know about the kids that make it who come from dysfunctional households, two big key things. One, they got more education than their parents, and two, they had a mentor, most commonly multiple mentors, most commonly teachers. You are changing lives for these kids who are at the margins, and I say to all of you, never forget that, because in fact, we can do this. Over 70% of the kids from dysfunctional households become functional adults, but it's all about giving them the kinds of support after school and in other areas so that they can have a chance, and we can give them a chance.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hi, back here. Okay.
I'm a preschool provider in the state of California and participating in the quality rating improvement system. Over the years, there have been a lot of really great things that have come out of that system, but there's also the fact that one teacher has got over 3,000 documented observations to do within about a 40-day period for her classroom to get her students or to stay on the timeline as set by the Department of Education for the DRDP tool. That's just one of the things that are impacting the lives of early learning providers. And for the first time in my existence as an early learning provider, we're losing people with site supervisor permits and program director permits to just poor quality daycares because they want to be able to just spend time with the kids. I hear a lot about research-based programming. Talk to me a little bit about your opinions about program-based research, where we're actually taking the tools and the information that we learn from what's being implemented in the classroom and listen to providers to kind of adjust what we think we already know.
Well, to be honest with you, I have read a lot of research on preschool and child development. I read From Neurons to Neighborhoods, you know, that tome that came out. I preferred The Scientist in the Crib. It was shorter, but I read them both, and I read a lot of other things. And I'll just tell you that I believe that we do need to be research-based in the work that we do. That's important. But the truth is, I had a universal preschool task force convened in '97. The report came out in '98. It called for universal preschool within 10 years. Don't look now, that was 19 years ago. So it's really important that we put our money where our mouth is, and we don't just keep adding things that we want educators to do in preschool. We have to really improve the investment that we're making. You know, prisons are an expense. Preschool's an investment. We have research that shows if we spent more money on preschool, we wouldn't have as many people on welfare, unemployment, in jail. And so I want to spend the money smartly on making sure not just that we have a bunch of rigorous requirements, but that we have a requirement that you have, yes, great education, but also that we're giving these kids the nurturing and the caring and the direct support that they need. Because in fact, you know, it's a game changer. But if you know, we don't do that, then we won't be able to spend enough on prisons. And I just don't want to spend it on prisons. I just don't think we have one prison guard for every 2 prisoners, $75,000 a year a prisoner. I'm sorry, that is not my values. So let's work smarter, but let's work with the goal of making this a high quality system that's in place in 5 years' time. We'll create a lot of great jobs, not only building the buildings that the kids are going to be in, but training and educating and supporting the teachers that are going to be there and the other staff that are going to support this effort. And at the end of the day, we'll have a smarter, better state. We did this once. Remember? When we were, you know, the Silicon Valley is here, not because of a confluence of rivers. We have no Tigris or Euphrates. We had a confluence of great educational opportunities in California in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And by God, it's time for us to wake up and smell the coffee, do what the rest of the first world and most of the second world is doing, and that's focusing on the youngest among us, and that's the little kids and the smallest. And with that, we have glory. We have a great opportunity for the future. We'll have great future for California if we do that.
Well, thank you, Delaine Eastin.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
Always a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Well, I'm feeling quite encouraged after this afternoon session to have 2 candidates who are committed to kids. And I'm now going to invite Camille Mabin to come up to give some closing remarks. But thank you, Delaine Eastin.
I'll go this way.
You go that way. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to see all of you. Barely. No, now, much better. So I just want to make sure, Ernesto, if John Kim wants to come up and close out? Or is, no? Okay. Keep going. All right. Well, I am so happy to be here. Was that not a great first session? Give everybody a hand. All good. I just think that sets us up so nicely for the next day and a half. I'm already excited about what we're going to do. Except there's one caveat that I have to tell you right off the bat, because I'm so honored to be able to be here and MC this event. But my family is on baby watch. We are in countdown mode for our 6th grandchild. And should my phone ring, bye-bye. So if suddenly you don't see me, you'll know where I am. Although I was told this morning I'm good to go, so we'll see how that happens. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for the 10th Birth to 5 Water Cooler Conference. 10 years, how can that be? Really, it seems like yesterday that we started conversations about a water cooler and what that would be. And thanks to the Advancement Project, but thanks mostly to Molly Munger, who's right here, and to my predecessor at First 5 California, Chris Perry, who really were the two that got this and pushed until we all showed up. So really, they had the vision for bringing early learning and care, the field together, to elevate key policy issues, to build on the expertise in the field that you all bring, and to advance equity, both educational and racial. Our shared goal and vision to see California build strong systems in the areas of infant toddlers, as you've heard today, of our dual language learners, and supporting our partnerships with families was there then as it is still today. So over the next couple of days, we will shine the spotlight on a few things. We're going to explore the early childhood education policy landscape, supporting, and this is just like, I love that we're talking about this, supporting the whole child from the start by elevating developmental health and learning needs of California's infants and toddlers and their families. We are going to talk about the babies, and that's so critical and important to our state. We're expanding the discussion of quality to reflect the diverse needs of our youngest learners, including our dual language learners. Fortifying ECE policy and advocacy with the voice of community and the lens of racial equity. Building on ECE principles and pedagogy of greater birth to 12 alignment. We heard that today. I heard not only Senator Mitchell, but two well-known people in K-12 reaching out to us to say, let's get this together and do it as one. So I just want to say we're all here, we're ready to go, and we'll have coffee anytime you want. So very excited. The water cooler has always been about making connections, and this year is no exception. Beginning, as we saw, with the discussion of gubernatorial candidates. Fascinating and very exciting to hear their views on what they envision for the future. As John said earlier, we are witnessing the future of California with these conversations today and tomorrow. I want to just call out how much we appreciate the work of Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Our friends at the foundation are committed to ensuring California's next governor is a champion for young children. And having us all have the opportunity to listen and have a voice is just helping that to happen. So I know we were invested in that conversation today, as we will be tomorrow. I also want to take just a moment to call out some friends who are in the audience today with us and acknowledge those from legislative offices who are here to listen and observe and take part in these conversations. If you could stand up when I call your name. Jessica Sams, who's the assistant to the speaker. Anthony Rendon. Gail Gronert, our good friend. Gail Gronert, there you are. Oh, right in front of me. Great. Who's also a special assistant to the speaker. Buck Ellingson, who is with Assemblymember Mark Levine's office somewhere, I think. And last but not least, Ryan Van Zylen, legislative aide to Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, excuse me. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here and look forward to conversations with all of you. But right now we're going to get started with our first keynoter of the conference. And I'd like to introduce to you Rashid Malik, who is a policy analyst for early childhood. We're not. I was going to say, you don't look like him.
I don't look like Rashid.
Okay.
But I'm nothing if not generous, and you all have been an extraordinary audience. You could use a break.
Oh.
Assuming. So why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then we'll fully shift over to this next part of the agenda.
Oh.
So we'll go with that.
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.